In a highly unusual move, Tony Atkins goes after the state Senate seat of fellow Democrat Marty Block. Laws regarding the right to die, fair pay, the distribution of pot, and energy efficiency land on Governor Brown's desk. And disappointment reigns in San Diego sports as the Padres end their season and the Chargers could be lame ducks. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the week's top stories. I'm Mark Sauer. And joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today are Scott Lewis, CEO of Voice of San Diego. Hi, Scott.
Hey, Mark.
Good to see you back again. Michael Smolens, politics editor for the San Diego Union Tribune. Hi, Michael.
Howdy, Mark.
And sportscaster Jay Paris of 1090 Sports Radio. Good to see you, Jay.
Mark, hello.
Well, Ronald Reagan was famous for citing the 11th commandment regarding politics, never disparage a fellow Republican. And Democrat Tony Atkins is taking that a step further. She's planning to unseat fellow Democrat Marty Block in the state Senate. Even Atkins, the soon-to-be ex-Speaker of the Assembly, says she's not comfortable doing it. Why did she decide to run? Well, here she is on KPBS just days before she announced her intentions.
I have found that the best way that I think I can fight for San Diego is in the state capitol. I went to Sacramento to work on affordable housing, and in that time period, being the majority leader, becoming speaker, a relationship with the governor, I really think that I am most effective at the state capitol. So.
All right, she loves it there in Sacramento. Scott, tell us why, how unusual, first of all, this is. This is pretty strange, isn't it?
Yeah, there were a few history buffs trying to identify the last such issue like this. I think that, locally we have experience in South Bay where a lot of Democrats go after each other. There was the moment when Juan Vargas thought he had the in on a state Senate seat, but then Mary Salas challenged it. But that was an open seat. And so, David Alvarez made the point, look, I always run against Democrats. I don't see what the big deal is. But that's the thing. In South Bay, it's Democrats versus Democrats. I think it was unusual. It just caught people by surprise because it basically implied that this had been her plan for 5 years, and we've been discussing her as a possible mayoral candidate,
right,
and other issues. But it turns out, if you believe her story, that she has never considered that at all, and she's been planning this for 4 or 5 years.
Okay, and this is going to be fairly costly, right? I mean, you have a safe seat. It wouldn't have cost much for the incumbent Block to stay there, and now we're going to spend a bunch of money, apparently.
I'm not.
A Democrat. You're not. I'm not. But the Democrats.
I think, yeah. I mean, she obviously feels like she can do a better job, and she wants to be there, and she apparently likes it. I think if you have a job and you can apply for it, I don't really care about the Democrats' problems with that. I think that but a lot of Democrats do. I mean, it's what they're wondering is, why do we have to have this fight? Why can't we focus on actually earning a seat? But she thinks, and when I asked them, what is my life going to be different as a constituent of that district, and they said results. So I guess they think that she's simply going to be able to perform better.
But not a lot of difference on the issues here. Not a lot. I mean, she endorsed Block, gave him some money in 2012.
Well, they were friendly, sure, and nobody can really find a lot of daylight between them on key issues, certainly. But, it sort of gets into this whole rivalry that is a real Sacramento and situation between the two houses. And Marty Block's been trying to make this a big deal, that this is, a slap in the face of the leadership, Kevin De Leon, the president pro tem. So we'll see. But, as Scott said, that there's concern because this could be millions of dollars, on a safe seat for Democrats. And they're trying to protect people in swing seats and pick up seats. So there's a concerted effort, obviously, to get resolution to this, to have somebody bow out. And most of the betting is that if anybody does, it'd be Marty Block. But he seems like he's coming out swinging.
Jay?
Was he blindsided by this? Did Marty see this coming, or did...
I don't think so. I mean,
right.
the story that Atkins says when people say, well, why are you doing this? I'm irritated that you're doing this. the story she says is, look, we met when we were trying to decide what to do several years ago, and he indicated that he would only do one term. I've never actually heard of a politician that promises one term that sticks to it. We had Jan Goldsmith, the city attorney, who promised a similar thing and ended up running again. But I think that she says he promised this, and their contention on the other side is that, yeah, he said maybe something like I would consider leaving, or it's not a guarantee. And so again, if you listen to her,
right.
She's been planning this for several years, which has a lot of ancillary implications.
Now, a poll out already on this, way ahead. My goodness gracious, where's the poll come from? But it's got Tony Atkins leading 2-1.
I asked a few people just before the show if we knew yet where it came from. No, obviously it sounds like somebody who supports Tony Atkins, shows her well above Marty Block, and the point of it, of course, is to try to force Marty Block to bow out or to persuade him to. But there's no indication he will yet.
Yeah, and money, she's got a lot more money, right?
Yeah, she did a really interesting thing where she raised $700,000 in the race for that seat, but for 2020. And so, basically saying, I'm going to run for it in 2020. And what she says now is that was out of respect for Marty Block to not make him be a lame duck right now. But it also seems like she was kind of hedging for the uncertainty that he might not run. So maybe that wasn't such a certain promise, even in her mind.
Mm-hmm. Now, big risk for her? I mean, what if she loses this bid?
Well, obviously it's a risk for both of them if you have two people like this running in the same seat. Just getting back to the money thing for 1 second, it's interesting because we've heard people don't want to talk publicly about it, but there are some people that were surprised, even if her inner circle wasn't. These are two candidates or politicians that the same people donate to, and some people donated believing they were donating to her to run in 2020. They support Marty Block, and they're concerned about that, or just felt that they weren't given the whole story. But that's a little bit of an ancillary thing.
Plenty of time to get over that between now and the election.
There's risk, but the wheels are in motion, and as Scott said, that poll, all the focus on her money, because there's other funds that have her, frankly, access right now to well over $1 million. And let's remember, she's going to be Speaker maybe into the mid-spring, and we'll have leverage to get more money. Block is going to have to rely on the Senate leadership, and they've got a lot of other fish to fry. So I think you'll see some movement. Obviously, the Atkins people are pushing a lot harder to get Block out. They're focusing on her relationship with the governor. And it was very interesting. The other day, the governor put out a release about some bill signings, and they had to do with economic development and, underprivileged communities and housing. And in the second paragraph, he just gushed at length about Tony Atkins and her leadership on this issue. Now, granted, housing's been her real political passion, but, no tea leaf is too small these days to read into what's going on there and, whether the governor and other powers will try to do something. One final note that if there's an effort to get Marty Block out, they're going to have to find him a soft landing, I think. And that's the question.
Get him someplace,
and we'll just have to see how that goes.
We will, and it's going to be interesting as we go forward. I did want to touch, before we leave this political segment here, on the big news nationally today. House Speaker John Boehner, of course, is resigning. There's a California part to this story. A lot of folks think Representative Kevin McCarthy will succeed Boehner as Speaker here. How likely is that? I mean, we're going to maybe see this fellow from Bakersfield and the Tea Party, the hard right folks. Is he a darling of that segment of the Republican Party?
I think he'll get it. It's just a matter of what he'll have to do to get it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Do you have a...
Well, yeah, McCarthy is up there in the leadership, and I don't think you're going to get somebody just from the hard right. That's not a small core, but obviously they're pushing on Boehner and stuff like that. But it is a broader caucus, and I think he's got a foot in a little bit both camps. It'll be interesting. I mean, suddenly having the speaker from California can mean a lot of things. Some of it good, obviously bringing, home the bacon, so to speak.
We had Nancy Pelosi, obviously. We had an experience
exactly,
with that recently.
But his views and relationship with the governor are not particularly good in terms of where they're both coming from on just about everything, whether it's water, whether it's environment, greenhouse gases, and so forth. So it'll be very interesting. But it does seem to be he's in line for the job. We'll see if he gets it.
And who wants that job? It seems like a nightmare herding feral cats.
Exactly, and some Democrats are sort of celebrating a little bit, and other Democrats are saying, you know, I mean,
to wear what you wish for.
Exactly, because this could be a lot worse if the right really takes a lot more hold of that caucus.
All right, we got a lot of work to do yet, so we're going to move on. A right-to-die bill fashioned after Oregon's law was resurrected in a special session over objections of Republicans and some Democrats. It awaits Governor Brown's signature, one of several bills now on his desk. And Michael, explain how this End-of-Life Act works, and as I said, was fashioned after Oregon's law.
Well, the big issue was, in addition to the big philosophical and moral questions, I mean, just for a second, one of the neat things about this, really, regardless of how you view it, is that, you know, so often in Sacramento, people are fighting over, you know, the slice of the pie and all these political machinations. Here's something that goes to people's core philosophy and moral views. So it was really a different kind of discussion and not the usual political aspect of it. Having said that, how it got revived, so to speak, was very political. You know, it was basically being blocked by the Assembly Health Committee.
Yeah, it was done. Let's move on.
Yeah, I mean, it never got to a vote. They withdrew it because they knew they didn't have the votes. But you mentioned this special session. Well, there's different rules with special sessions, and that allowed them basically to reconstitute the committees that's going to send the health bills to the floor. And, you know, really had a local tie because Speaker Atkins had a big hand in forming that committee, so they got more pro votes on it, and that's really how it came to pass politically. But you asked getting back to your initial question, I mean, some of the safeguards are, you know, somebody has to be diagnosed, to be dead, basically, dying, you know, within 6 months.
Really have to be terminally ill.
Yeah, and, you know, a clear diagnosis. And also 2 oral requests to different doctors for this end-of-life medication, I think 15 days apart, and also a written request that has to be witnessed by somebody to vouch that this person's not being coerced and is of, you know, sound mind in doing this. Right. So they think that takes care of a lot of the concerns that there might be, you know, some coercion or even, you know, an individual that has a terminal illness not wanting to burden their family with money might want to, you know, kind of move ahead on this.
Right. Now, Republicans are against this
largely,
pretty much with a party line, but there's other folks too, some
it's not
Dems,
exactly,
right?
You know, a lot of, some Democrats, particularly Latino Democrats, I mentioned Lorena Gonzalez, or I didn't mention Lorena Gonzalez, but she was opposed to this, and she was, interestingly, on that initial health committee. She was one of the no votes, as was Republican Rocky Chavez. And so that, you know, these kind of people were moved off the new committee in order to move this on. But it was largely a you know, partisan split, but like Republican Brian Mainshine supported it, and some Democrats, and not just Latino Democrats, opposed it. And what was interesting is, you know, some of the heartfelt stories. One Assemblywoman, who was it? I forget. Assemblywoman Brown. She, her son was diagnosed terminally, or doctors told her basically to pull the plug, that he's going to die, and she stuck with it, and now he's married and has a kid. So she said, you know, doctors aren't always right. There are these anecdotes that really help drive this.
Right, and then there's stories on the other side of terribly painful deaths and these horrible situations where doctors really can't do anything, and the patient doesn't have a right. Of course, that woman who moved up to Oregon.
Well, let's not forget, that's really what drove this. Brittany Maynard, who lived in the Bay Area, and her, you know, really gripping video that was a YouTube sensation. And after she died, and, you know, she lobbied hard for that sort of, you know, from beyond, you know, life. But also her mother, who lives in Carlsbad, Debbie Ziegler, was really a key figure up there, you know, who really just came off as a real genuine person. And, you know, she was just absolutely thrilled, as you can imagine. It was a very emotional moment watching that final vote to send it to the governor.
In May, the governor, is he going to sign this, a devout Catholic?
I don't know. You know, I mean, he, you know, was a Jesuit in training way back when. We'll see. He's getting a lot of pressure on both sides, so it's going to be an interesting call. All
right, let's look at a few of the other bills that are awaiting his signature. The Fair Pay Act, what does that one do?
Well, there are laws in place in California that basically you can't discriminate on a whole variety of fronts, including employment and including pay. But what this does, obviously there's issues with that because across the country and in California there's been tons of surveys that just show women do not make as much as their male counterparts in, you know, identical or similar jobs. This basically gives them more avenues to challenge that. And what's sort of interesting, they, you know, for instance, let's say a maid at a hotel can not only, you know, have to compare to if there's a male, you know, housekeeper, but a janitor who might have similar duties. So they can start sort of crossing the, you know, areas as to what the employment and the job comparisons are. Now, obviously, they have to make the case that these are similar jobs and I should be paid that much. Another interesting aspect is that it can it doesn't have to be just your place of employment. For instance, if it's a hotel chain that has a hotel in Bakersfield and a hotel in San Diego, they might be able to go to that Bakersfield situation, which obviously you would think the cost of living is less and the pay is less, and look at that and, well, in San Diego, this comparable person's getting paid more. I should get so now again, these are all things that need to be worked out in court. That's not a silver bullet, but those are the kinds of things I think that they toughened up the law to give particularly women more say or more hope to get equal pay.
There was an idea to prohibit the effort of asking employees what they used to earn at previous jobs. Did that go through?
I don't recall. Okay. I don't think that did. I thought that got vetoed out, but I want to be cautious on that.
Well, medical marijuana is another one we've had ever since '96 when they passed Prop 215.
That's right.
We've been struggling with how do you distribute this? How do you grow it? How do you come up with the rules and the guidelines of the pot shops and everything else? Where are we now, and are we anticipating maybe a vote to approve all marijuana use, recreational use as well?
Well, yeah, there's bills on the governor's desk to finally, have statewide regulation on this thing people passed, like you said, in '96. I mean, it really shows the dysfunction of Sacramento that we haven't been able to get that. The irony, as you allude to, is that they're doing this almost on the eve, if you will, of a public vote on, doing it just for recreation, not just this is for medical marijuana. And it does set up a whole, regulatory system, licensing system at the state that will be enacted in several years, and everybody's going to have to comply with that. Even, San Diego's finally got its act together, and they will move forward. But these medical marijuana shops are ultimately going to have to get those permits. But the big thing is that they believe that they can sort of graft this onto, if it's broadened to recreation use, that just, whatever the marijuana shop is will have to live basically under these guidelines.
Okay, so we'll be able to work with that. And one other interest before we got off this topic is this kind of watered down energy efficiency legislation. We lost the big gasoline aspect of that, right? But there's other things that are going on.
Yeah, the proponents, they like to point out that, hey, there's a lot of victory here in terms of it requires a reduction of 50% in energy use, making buildings more energy efficient, like doubling their energy efficiency, and also by 50% increasing the amount of renewable energy and so forth. But yeah, they wanted to decrease the use of petroleum by 50% by 2030, I think it was, and that got knocked out. The oil industry just put on the big campaign, and they just couldn't withstand that.
They had the money. So we'll see how the governor goes on all of this stuff, and the real one to watch, I think, is Right to Die. That may get a veto, I would think.
Well, we'll see. He did raise one the only objection he really had was that he didn't think it was proper to bring that up in the special session. But is that going to be the cause for him to veto the bill? I would suspect it would be a larger, view of things.
And then maybe it goes to the ballot. It may go to the ballot if he does that at some future point. All right, we're going to shift gears now to sports. September is the time for changing seasons. Baseball is ending in San Diego as football begins. Not a lot to cheer about in either sport for local fans, though. Let's start with the Padres, who are playing out the string far out of the playoff picture again. Jay, it wasn't supposed to be that way in spring training. It was a season of promise
There was a lot of promise, or a lot of expectations. This Padre fan base, Lord, they've been patient, Lord and Padres, but it's fifth straight year of a losing team and double digits trailing the first place team. But the new ownership and increased payroll, if you would, had people believe it and had people hoping that people to go downtown not just to see that pretty ballpark, but to see a team. And
we had some big names. We had some sluggers this year. The payroll went up.
Right, but there's a lot of things called roster construction, and you could see that team was built that was going to strike out a lot. You could see that they didn't have any left-handed starting pitching. There wasn't an everyday shortstop, and the baseball is such a sport that if you have blemishes, it's usually exposed because it's such a long season, so many games. So. Actually, last two nights they've had two walk-off wins, and probably two of the more exciting
games of the year here
against the Giants, who are playing for everything.
They're still hanging in there,
and are the defending world champions. So they're going to hit reset. They're certainly not going to tear it down, and I don't think they're going to go back to the old days of fire sale. But there's still some work.
Well, they lost their manager. Bob Black lost his job, so it will be a new manager.
There will be a new manager. I think Pat Murphy will probably throw his hat in this ring. I don't think he'll be back. I think they'll go out and get somebody more experienced. They might go get Brad Osmus, your old Tiger guy.
He's going to lose his job in Detroit too.
Well, it was like a little league team where everybody got to play each position.
Right,
it's like they shifted.
Well, they play workup sometimes, and you're rotated around. But it's it's tough to build it on the fly, and it was almost like it was a guy doing a fantasy league, and they had all the big names, but baseball, you gotta bring it all together.
So there'll be a lot of action in the offseason. Are they likely to increase payroll again, chase some big name expensive free agents?
But you got to remember, 4 guys are going to make $67 million next year. Matt Kemp, Melvin Upton Jr., James Shields, Craig Kimbrell. You need 9 on the field. You need 25 on the roster.
They're already locked in.
They're already locked in at $6 to $8 million. They probably won't go after Justin Upton, the left fielder who's had a heck of a year. He's going to be expensive. So they're going to have to do it at a little cheaper.
In attendance this year, did folks still come out?
That's the key. You look at the standings and how many games they won, and you go, woe is me, they had a bad year. The guys on the marketing side, they had a heck of a year. I mean, the attendance is up 5,000 a night. The ratings on TV are up. So, the baseball operations department, they're taking the arrows. The guys on the other side saying, hey, where's the parade?
Yeah. Well, all right, let's shift to the Chargers now. We've talked a lot, and we will talk more about the stadium and all. I did want to bring up the NFL owners are going to throw the holy water or not on this whole move to L.A. Are we expecting that decision sometime this fall?
They're going to talk again in October. Trying to pin them down is like catching a falling knife. It's hard to do, but it seems like it's shifted from the league and those executives to a group of ownerships who really have some pull in the league. So, 1 team, 2 team. There won't be 3 teams, but I still think the proposal in Inglewood's probably the one they like. The Rams are probably the forerunner there. I could see the Chargers being one of their co-tenants.
Yeah, they could be. So what's attendance this year like with the Chargers? They only had
it's
small
good.
sample
And
now.
a lot of that is a lot of people from out of town coming in. Whenever you have the Steelers on your schedule, the Bears, the Broncos, I mean, it's an attractive home schedule. Combine that with people saying it might be the last year. Let's go take Junior to a game before they leave town. So what's going to be interesting to watch is if they don't get off to a fast start. They're 1-1 right now, kind of scuffling going into Minnesota this week. If they start losing, it could turn a little ugly.
Well, they also had big bump in season ticket sales. Was that partially because this might be it? So a lot of
partially
people
that, and let's be clear here: the Chargers are very good at selling huge block of tickets to ticket brokers, and people bemoan the fact, well, the other team, the other city had all their fans in. Well, yeah, because you've sold tickets to brokers across America, so that's kind of...
and people like to come to San Diego.
Exactly, you circle that one.
All right, I want to shift to the NFL itself here. The game remains wildly popular, big TV ratings, and yet there is this cloud of injured players. Last week we had this report about these deceased players and the head injuries with that, which was a shocking report. And now we've got this report just today. The league stats show 15% of the players have been injured through week 2 of the season. What, Scott, another industry in America that could take that kind of injury rate?
I've been saying for years, imagine if there was a factory down the street that was churning out such injuries of injured workers. I mean, we would have investigations, we'd be shutting it down. This factory not only doesn't have that sort of thing, but it also is demanding a giant a public subsidy of its operations. And so, yeah, it's definitely concerning. And I think that we're going to have to grapple with that over time. I bet you those stats don't even include all the people sort of, picking up the pieces, trying to keep going each week.
Playing hurt.
Without, the stats on the drugs they inject every week just to keep going. It's a tough thing to swallow.
Jay, I mean, this is a brutal sport here, and people still love it.
They don't have fantasy leagues for the factory guys.
Right.
And these people don't care.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound callous or anything, but the fantasy football, and it has never been more popular, and it's next man up, it's get them off the field, let's go. Yeah. It is it's looked at as such a distance that's a human being laying there who's somebody's dad or brother, but the guys betting on it don't care. I think what you got to watch more is the National Federation of High School Associations. Numbers are down at the high school level. A lot more people going to lacrosse. A lot of people going year-round in one particular sport.
Soccer maybe gets more popular.
Exactly.
So parents maybe aren't letting their kids
if it's your
get
kid, you go, no way. If it's Sunday on your couch, you'll go get another guy in there.
Jay, do you see, a lot of people have suggested that it's more of a long-range concern for the NFL, that like you say, that the fans, they love the gladiator sport, the blood sport, and they don't really care, and it is callous, but that seems to be the case. But is there a trend down the line that you're just not going to have as many kids participating, and does that hit the league, again, way down the line?
Yeah, I would think so at some point.
I mean, they're doing so well now, they've never been better.
It's never been more popular, and kids are gravitating to other sports, but you only need 11. You live in twice, so that's 22. But I think somebody's going to die out there. I really do. I mean, the size of these men and how fast they are going, it is such a different game. It's like trying to tackle a car that goes by on the sidelines. Somebody's
Well, and of course now with the report I mentioned with the concussions and the head injuries, Junior Seau, the tragedy here, we've had that repeated in a number of popular players over the years. Webster there in Pittsburgh, a great Hall of Famer.
It's just common sense. It doesn't pass the eye test. I mean, you just watch these collisions, and Gina Seau, his ex-wife, you know, when we asked her about it, it's not ballet. You know, these guys are just abnormal men running into each other at a high rate of speed.
At that size, yeah. Scott?
Well, I think I hate the term injury prone. That comes up a lot. You know, like these guys are getting beat up. I mean, they break their leg. Doesn't mean they're prone to it. It means that somebody broke their leg. You know, I think we're gonna have to grab. I asked the Chargers about this. I said, look, you're asking for a public subsidy, or if you stay in San Diego, you're gonna need a giant one. How do you justify that, considering you know what this does? And they said, look, we're making a lot of changes, and we're gonna be better about it. I mean, it's a tough question about the existential dilemma that the NFL and people who love the NFL are facing. Hopefully they can come up with some miracle solutions, but I think more will just have to reconcile.
With a few seconds left. Give us
trying to do more with safety and where you tackle.
The helmets are better.
The equipment, and they don't show up the blow hits as much. That said, that's their bread and butter.
It's a violent game. Yeah. It's not like the NHL where they can ban hits above the shoulders. I mean, you've got to collide helmets in this.
You go to the race, to see the car wreck, and that's what this is.
And that's what this is. So there's a limited amount on what they can do, and if the team leaves.
And then again, they're playing on Thursday nights, and they're playing on Saturdays, and they want to tell you about player safety.
They want to add 2 games.
Yeah, so.
All right, well, we'll see how that plays out as we go through this season. Well, that does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Scott Lewis of Voice of San Diego, Michael Smolens of the San Diego Union Tribune, and Jay Paris of 1090 Sports Radio. A reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.